Hello, welcome to the iClasses.com. How are you guys? This is Sia Teptara. Behind me is the city of Bangkok. So today we are going to draw a muscle guy or something, right? We're just gonna render using Procreate and iPad and Apple Pencil, of course. We're gonna show you how to draw each part of the muscle, and then we're gonna render them nicely. I'm gonna explain to you how I break it down and what tool I use, what opacity, which you see on my screen. So a lot of you would be, if you watched my video before, you would be able to guess what I'm doing with these. And but there's a thought process behind it, so I'm gonna try to put that out. And sometimes I'll talk off the topic, but usually it's pretty much related to drawing. So along with the process of what I'm drawing, I'm gonna try to put the commentary and as much as I can for you to understand. And if you have any question or you want to say hi, then just feel free to comment down below and I will get right back to all of you. Alright guys, so today I am going to show you how I render a character muscle one more time. We had two previous tutorial before, so the more you watch, each one's gonna be similar, but I usually add something new to it. So if you can watch all of them, that would be pretty good. So sometimes you might listen to something and then you kind of forgot, or you might have missed it. So usually it's a good idea to kind of rewatch it from time to time. Every time I watch tutorial, I pretty much do the same thing. So I'm gonna break this drawing down, and this character, the lighting direction is basically coming from here, right? So, and you're gonna see these are pretty scribble, so it's not like a smooth rendering like my previous one. If you can go to my channel, you can watch the other one, which has a smoother rendering. In this one, I'm looking for a sketchy look and rough brush stroke, basically, just experimenting. So when the lighting is coming from this direction, this part here, right, this is gonna hit the light, and as it goes down, it's gonna be shadow, and same as here. And usually shadow will connect it, but in some case, if save this part here and it has form, let's say if I did a wireframe, it will be like this, and it has this face that are facing down and this face that are kind of, if you look at it on the side, it will curve like this, right? So you have the plane that are facing kind of toward the below or toward the south, or the other one is toward the right. So that's why you have that shadow in that area. And this is probably a shadow that kind of casting from the arm, but these are not totally super accurate, just an idea of how to render the form. So if you break this down to the geometry, you understand it more. And since the lighting coming from basically probably a little more like that, this area would probably hit that and cast a shadow. And probably I did this part wrong. This should be a bit lighter, right? So let's say if I add a little more light there. Whoa, wrong layer. Okay. Turn that on. So you see that the cast shadow is coming basically from, you can just block that whole thing, but probably you have to go into the shadow and try to readjust the value or paint over some of the value. All right, so that should be a little more accurate if I were to recorrect it and trying to make it
a finished art. But since it's a sketch, so I did it in like an hour, a little bit over. All right, so that's one part. Now I'm just gonna break down from the beginning. So at first I just start my really pretty drawing right here. This is, I try really hard to draw something nice, but it's always end up to be a scribble. Then I just add some shape, and usually at this stage I'm trying to get the shape to be basically proportionally correct first. Proportionally correct doesn't, like anatomy I'll come and apply them later. In this stage I'm just looking basically to see if all the length of the arm are correct and are they on the right direction. So here you have to think of like three-dimensional space. This one gonna angle down a bit more, right? And this one's coming a little bit more forward. And then the fist. So every time you draw something, or every time you try to adding volume or making shape, always think of the third dimension space, or the z-axis. That will get you. It's pretty hard sometimes, but the more you do it and the more you think about it, you get better at it. And this one polygon this way, and that's why these, like if you draw it in 2D and you just have line draw, it will look pretty short unless you're adding some sort of a contour line or some when you paint you probably have to add some lighting. And the directional of the muscle are also important, which one is on top of which, because all the muscle are always overlapping, right? So like we look at the final, this part of the chest is on top of this bicep and tricep here, right? So and this you have to kind of think about, this one gonna be on top? If he turns around, if the arm's turning around, like this is a good example. So this one deltoid is on top of the bicep because he's turning deltoid to be in the front, dominating the whole image, right? And you see a little bit of the tricep. But in this one, you're gonna see more of the bicep, and the bicep's gonna be, you're gonna see that line from the bicep. So you draw, probably it's gonna be like that. Right, and this one, you're gonna see this arm coming out. So you see what I mean? This one is overlapping on top. The deltoid is the shoulder, it's overlapping on top. This one, this line of the biceps coming on top. This one, the line of the shoulder is coming on top. So it depends on which direction it's facing or which way it's rotating, right? So that's also very important. If you just use either the line drawing alone, you can just do this part overlapping, right? Deltoid, bicep, and then the rest, whatever. Okay, so now hopefully my explanation is clear enough. And if you look at this here, right, I already have that line that are in the front or on top of the other muscle group. And as when I get to this stage, so I get the shape right, and I get to this stage, you will notice that there are two areas: the area of light and the area of shadow. So basically, the easiest way to do it, I would begin with thinking about the value and break them down to two. One light, one shadow, and try to say if you have the outline outside. And basically, if you look at the comic book that have a super high contrast art, like Mike Mignola, I would highly recommend, or Frank Fasada. Sort of look at those as your go-to Bible, basically. So you see that the way they lit the figure, they have a very solid knowledge of how the light would be in one area and the shadow would be in one area. So practice that when you see the figure. And if the figure is all exposed to light, that's probably isn't going to happen. You're not going to see two very high contrast value. It's just probably going to be just one value. So you have to look at the image that have pretty good light source in terms of high contrast, so you can have enough area for the shadow. Once I have these two area covered, the pen doesn't count yet, then I will try to go inside and try to work on the value in the shadow and the value in the light. So if you look at it, the value inside the shadow, the lighter value inside the shadow would be 22% lighter, and basically the darker value of the shadow will be darker than the value of the area that has the light, because this, if you click on the value, it should be darker than the darker value in the light area. So in the light area, we'll have the lighter value, which is this one, and the lighter value in the darker area is going to be this one. So you separate into light and shadow, and once you have the light and shadow, you separate the shadow again into two, and you separate the light again into two, and try to work around that. And when you separate it, just try to stay within that two value of the light and two value of the shadow. Sometime as you work on it, it's probably you're gonna have some soft edges which will create those mixing value, and sometimes you get the other value also, but try to stay with the main two and stick with the two on the light and the two in the shadow. You can split it into three, and that's going to be a little more complicated and it's going to take you longer time, but usually stay within the two to three. The third one probably going to use the least, right? So stay with the two. And once I have all these, then I'm just working inside all this area and then just trying to get around it. This one and this one's not that much different. Basically, they're pretty much the same, except this one's slightly cleaner, and I work on the facial structure a little bit more and change it because I didn't really like that one. Alright guys, well, I hope that explains some of the I hope you understand what I'm talking about. I'm trying to explain it in terms of the foundation of light and shadow, and how the muscle would work in the overlapping and in the front and the back, and contour line, foreshortening. They're all pretty important. Alright, well, let's get start to the drawing and see my real process. Alright, so I'm starting off with the canvas, and I just kind of low down the light a little bit. So I kind of like it light gray in the background. I never really, if I'm going to paint, I never do it on white. Even if I'm drawing, I'm still doing it on the off-white, not so much. But if I'm painting or rendering, usually I'll do it on 80% opacity. That's just a matter of preference. I think it's better to have it gray because you can pop the highlight a little easier. So now I'm drawing the torso and trying to look for the pose. And as you can see, I draw the rib cage, adding the arm and the forearm. It's kind of coming forward a little bit. So this one's going to be the left hook. He's kind of looking at the making the pose as he's punching somebody with the left hook. That's what I'm trying to do. And this the right leg is supposed to come forward, because when you punch leg, or when you run, the leg and the arms are usually have to be the opposite. If one arm is coming forward, the legs on the same side is going backward. So that's sort of like a natural mechanical of the body usually. If because you have to use your hips and your shoulder in the opposite way to create the opposing force. So you got that push, right? So now I kind of got pretty much the whole body here, and then I'm applying the value onto the sketchy line, and I'm trying to find the value because I realized it was a bit too dark for the base, and basically I'm trying to find the lighter and the darker value, and one of them is going to be my dark and one of them is going to be my light, but I usually start in the middle. So I tend to use mid-tone a lot, and then I will push it into darker and lighter later on. Usually the mid-tone will stay in the light. If I put the mid-tone in the lighter part, the light usually stay the light, but the dark usually get quite darker, especially in the shadow, as you see in this video process. And I'm adding his pants. At first I was trying to put making his leggings some sort of a hakama or some sort of a skirt, but then you wouldn't, if I cover it all, then it's going to be hard to see the legs movement or the leg separation. So I make a pant instead, a pair of pants, so that you can see what legs going backward and what legs coming forward. And the one that you see that have a darker value at the moment is the one that's coming forward, and the one's going backward is the other one. So now I'm creating a rough area for the shadow. Then you can see the separation of light and shadow pretty clear at the moment. And now I'm adding some kind of hair, and I usually, like recently, just been drawing a bunch of tribal hairstyle, so I'm kind of gonna stick to that. And then I changed my mind a little bit, but then in the end I give him a tribal hairstyle with lots of beard later. All right, so at this point I didn't give him the hairstyle yet, but pretty soon I'm going to shave his head. Now I decided I'm going to go darker on the shadow, and also I'm going to put his face in the shadow because he's kind of bending a little forward, so he's facing his face is looking down a little, and the light source is coming from the left side of the screen. And if you look at my opacity, I usually leave it at 100 most of the time. For reason, usually I like to get the pressure on the pen, same as in Photoshop. I like to control the pen pressure by using my hand to feel it around. And sometimes it could be pretty hard, but sometimes you want a really light touch, then I would just lower the opacity a little bit. And now I'm trying to I'm using a texture brush, kind of not knowing what I'm doing. I haven't been using Procreate for that long, so I'm going to be experimenting a lot, and that's going to be quite time consuming in comparison to Photoshop. You see my stuff in Photoshop, I know exactly what to do where, but in Procreate sometimes you see me missing something, and the accuracy is not quite there, but I get the point across. All right, so now I'm adding, basically now we have three values. The darkest one is going to be the darker shadow of the shadow, and if it read as light and shadow, then I'm trying to separate each one to the bigger block, and then now I'm using the soft brush on the brush to soften some of the edge that are on the same plane. Basically, if they're on a different plane, like if the plane change drastically, like on a different angle, then you can keep that a harder edge, or if it's occlusion shadow, then you can keep harder edge. But as for the volume, what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to create the big form. So I'm trying to go for the big form first and trying to separate the light and shadow over the big form, rather than going to a small portion on each muscle group and try to render those right off the bat. Trying to get the bigger form to look correct in terms of lighting it. And then afterward, you can go in and use the existing value that you have, create those not fine detail, but create those detail of the muscle group inside the existing value that you have, and that is going to it's going to look as if it's part of the image, rather than you're going piece by piece. You're not going to have the overall lighting. And a lot of the time I've seen my student try to render each part one by one and using the similar value of light and shadow. It didn't get the whole form. So if you're doing the whole big form first and going to break it down to the smaller pieces, let's just say if you look at his stomach, it has that rendered mostly in shadow, right? So I'm trying to maintain that value range, but trying to create the abdominal muscle at the same time. So what I'm saying is the value that you'll be using on the stomach part or on the abdominal part is not going to be the same value that you would render on his right chest, because those are the part that will get hit by the light a lot more prominently. So the part that is in the shadow, you're going to have to work using the existing value that is already in that form. If you know what I'm talking about. So you see as I'm doing. So now, once I have all this shape, I'm drawing over with just darker line. Just at this point, I'm trying to create or finding a design, right? So I'm trying to make sure everything has the correct proportion. So the line that I'm going to draw will also be used as a occlusion, or the darkest part of each maybe muscle group, or the occlusion of the two pieces, like in between the arm and the chest. And now I'm trying to break down the abdominal and the pectoral and the part of the arm. So this darker line can be pretty useful. And then in Procreate, I like to use the smudge tool, which I don't never do in Photoshop. It's kind of weird that Procreate has. Is pretty nice. Maybe I'll try the smudge tool in Photoshop next time. I never tried it before, but I find that it's a lot easier to work with rather than using the soft brush. But maybe later I'll change my mind once I find the compatible tool with what I am doing, or what if the soft brush or any kind of brush give me the right result. But at the moment, I use a lot of smudge tool, and I usually merge them down, like if I have the darker value on one layer and the mid-tone in one layer, I will most of the time merge them down. Depends too. If I want to just keep the dark value, I might not merge them, but if I want to blend it, I'll merge it. So when I smudge it, then it will catch on the value in the back also. So as you see in this video. So now I think the proportion is fine, and I'm trying to get the angle of the face, because the face has to be facing down, but I couldn't get it right for some reason. Sometimes everybody has a hard time, once in a while or every now and then you run into the problem, and it seems like I'm getting stuck in this with his head, because I couldn't quite get the right angle. But as it goes on, I find a way to solve it. So, all right. Now, as you see, like his face, the front plane of his face got a really dark value. So I have to kind of find my way to find the side of his face. So you see the mid-tone, not the light one on his neck, but the mid-tone on the face will be on the side plane of his face. So usually I'm trying to separate the plane so that I can identify them, and I can work with those value on the plane, right? So tweak it and trying to get the correct shape for each plane that I'm using. All right, so okay, what I'm doing here now, just trying to get the head. So trying to pick the value and try to get the shape of the forehead, and eventually I'll give him a bolt, a chef head on the top, basically. You can fast forward this part, it's not anything significant because I change his facial structure or his face later on. I give him a lot of beard. All right, so I add the back of I give him a knot in the back, but then I deleted the knot for some reason afterwards. So, and I give him big beard. I'm trying to find, yeah, I should have cut this part out, but I forgot, I guess. Well, you can see my process and see sometimes that, my thought process, like usually I'm just going with the flow, and whatever I can come up with at the moment, I'll just add them, right? But usually a lot of time it doesn't end up to look like the first initial thought. So as I find a way to make it look better, then I sort of improvise it, and if I can make it look better, then I'll switch it around, see what it look like if the character doesn't have beard, should I give him a beard? If it doesn't look good, if it looks better with the beard, I'll keep the beard. So that's part of the daily routine of concept artists. If something looks good or looks better, then you kind of add on to it. And sometimes when you get the description from the writer, you could actually work within the constraint of the description. But a lot of time, if you find a way to make it look slightly better or have more personality or something that give it a flavor, and the writer or the designer will come in and they see it, then they're like, oh, I like this one better. So the description you can influence the description also that way. If depends on the writer. Some of the writer that I work with, usually if they I can have an input in terms of design, and I can design because usually you have to design different variation of the character anyways. So it depends on which one they'll pick. Sometimes you strictly have a very design that would fit the description exactly, but then you have another version that's kind of a little bit off from the version, and another version that you go extreme with whatever you trying to add on top of what is already exists. All right, so off the topic. Anyways, yeah, those are variation of the character, right? So now, if you look at it, it has two value. Now I'm trying to add six-pack, and in this process, I already thought out the process of what I am going to do with all this dark line that is put in, right? So these are going to be the shadow part of the six-pack or of the abdominal muscle, and I just put a scribble on it because I know that after I put all these scribble into place, then later on I will just using the smudge tool, like what I'm doing right now, and just smudge so that it would create this form on the surface of this mesh. So same thing, I'm going to the mid part of the abdominal, and now I'm working on the bicep of the right arm, and now just keep on the lowest part as that line. You have to keep the hardest edge because that's where the bottom part of your abdominal muscle group, maybe pack 1, pack 2, change the plane into the second row, and the second row, once you go onto the surface of the second row, it will hit the light. So keep the bottom, the end of the row hard edge, same as when the muscle transition, right? With when the deltoid transition to bicep, the muscle is overlapping, so the deltoid is kind of going inside, and that's why it's hidden from the light, and then the biceps starting to coming forward, and the part that's coming forward is going to be the part that's hit the light. So now I'm kind of done with the abdominal, and I'm working on the left arm and trying to create the form, same thing. So as you paint, you have to kind of don't zoom in too much. You have to be able to see the overall form if it still look okay, or are they looking as a whole, or are they looking at separate pieces, like individual pieces. I've seen that a lot in a lot of beginners digital painting. They just paint each one in the separate manners. So, and then trying to put them together, it won't look right. So you have to get the big form first, and then you're using the existing value of the big form. Like if you look at the stomach, right? His abdominal part will have the darker value within the dark value, and on his pectoral will have a lighter value, but then it will also have a darker value on the darker on the shadow part. But the shadow in that on his right pec, it's only a little bit, and mostly it has that mid-tone and the lighter value. So be aware of what you are doing with the form. You got to get the big form, then you slowly, kind of like when you chisel a marble, or you try and sculpt something, then you're trying to get the big form first, and you're going in and trying to chisel a smaller part or the secondary part, and then after you got done with the big torso form, the whole torso, then you're going to chisel for the pecs and then abdominal and so on, right? And then afterward, you might, okay, I might want to make this a little deeper, so it got a little bit darker occlusion shadow and so on. And same as in rendering or painting, so you have to consider the biggest form first. And if you're painting the environment, that's even a little more complicated than the character, because you have to separate the foreground, midground, and background, and you have to be consistent with the value arrangement of each distance, and so that you can have the depth of, so you can create the depth within your 2D. So in 2D space, to create a 3D looks, it's quite tricky, but if you understand it, and if you have a solid foundation, have your knowledge on all these value and lighting, then you're gonna be fine. And if you really want to know more, you can watch all my video on my YouTube channel, or you want to go deeper, or if you want the set that I already have, the series of Ultimate Digital Painting for Beginners, you can go download it on my website, or Gumroad, or Qbert/CATFTara, Gumroad/CATFTara, Gumroad.com. Or you can go down the link below the video, and those gonna be like 20 something hours. So see, I can, like, that's a pretty nice segue there, I thought, but I don't know. That's a shameless plug anyways. So all right, I'm probably not gonna have time to talk all the way to the end. I have about maybe 15-20 minutes left, but you probably know all this process, because this is just going to be repeat, but it's going to be a little more refined. So if you look at the process and look at the interface, you probably know what I'm doing. If you have any question, please post them down below the comment. And if you have any suggestion on the video, also feel free to comment down below. And I'm running out of time today, so I'm going to have to go work on my stuff. But now you have the video, and I'm gonna try to be consistent with the amount of video I'm uploading, and I'm gonna try to get them variation. But the post is going to be coming like on Saturday. I'll try to post the figure drawing and poses and stuff, but on Sunday I'm not sure if you want to see more of the rendering muscle or maybe color or maybe a portrait. We'll see. Just post them down below and give me some idea, or maybe a character design with the drawing. All right, guys, because I don't know like who are watching these, like what kind of skill level you are, and maybe I'm just gonna I'm trying to cover from the beginning to the intermediate. All right, guys, well, enjoy the video.